Claire stood by the bedroom mirror, adjusting her earrings with deliberate precision. 2 days, she said, her voice smooth, casual. Just enough time to recharge. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her with a neutral expression. Studying her. You sure you don't want me to come? I asked, voice light. Could be fun. Her reflection stiffened for half a second before she turned, smiling. Daniel, she laughed, walking over to me, her fingers running through my hair like she always did when she wanted to reassure me. This is just something I need to do alone. You understand, right? I nodded slowly, my expression unchanging. But inside, I knew. The little inconsistencies had been piling up. The late nights at work, the sudden need for privacy, the way she angled her phone away from me. And now, she was spending the weekend at a retreat. Except she wasn't. I had checked. The wellness retreat she claimed to be staying at didn't exist. And that meant one thing. Claire was lying. She left at dawn, her suitcase neatly packed, her movements effortless, like a woman with nothing to hide. I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed my keys and stepped outside. The GPS tracker I had planted under her car the night before was already active, feeding me her location in real time. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to see it with my own eyes. The drive stretched on for hours, the roads winding along the coast, the morning sun casting long shadows across the empty highway. And then she took a detour. Not toward the mountains. Not toward any retreat. But toward the Ocean Crest Resort, an elite, 5-star getaway. I clenched the wheel, my heart steady, my mind calculating. This wasn't some mistake. She hadn't simply changed her mind. This was planned. And whoever she was meeting, they were already waiting. I parked across the street, hidden behind a row of palm trees, and watched as Claire stepped out of her car. She wasn't dressed for a retreat. No hiking gear, no meditation-friendly outfit. Instead, she wore a flowing sundress, heels tapping lightly against the pavement, her sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose. A woman dressed for romance, not solitude. Then, right on cue, a black BMW pulled up beside her. The door opened, and he stepped out. Tall, well-dressed, too familiar with my wife. Nathan Reynolds. I had seen him before, at her office events, work parties, always hovering too close. Claire had insisted they were just colleagues. A harmless friend. But as she walked toward him now, as she smiled like a woman in love, I knew the truth. And then, she kissed him. Not hesitant. Not guilty. A deep, passionate kiss, right there in the open. Like I was already erased from her life. I didn't move. Didn't rage. Didn't make a sound. I just watched. Because I wasn't here to confront her. I was here to destroy her. I didn't move. Not when Claire kissed him. Not when they walked into the resort together, arms brushing, her laughter ringing through the air like a twisted melody. I just sat in my car, watching. Waiting. This wasn't the time for impulsive actions. No. That's what they'd expect. They'd expect the betrayed husband to storm into the lobby, cause a scene, demand answers. But Claire didn't deserve an angry confrontation. She deserved something colder. Sharper. Unforgiving. I was going to make her regret every single lie. I needed access, a way to move freely inside the resort without drawing attention. So, I booked a room. Not under my name. I had planned for this possibility, reserving a suite under an alias a week ago. A gut feeling, a creeping suspicion, had told me Claire was going to slip eventually. And she did. The check-in process was quick. The receptionist smiled, handing me the keycard. "Welcome to Ocean Crest, Mr. Carter." The irony wasn't lost on me. By the time I made it to my room on the 6th floor, Claire and Nathan were already settled in. Their suite was on the 8th floor, just 2 levels above mine. Close enough to observe. Close enough to strike when the moment was right. I waited. I stayed in the background, watching them from a safe distance. They spent the afternoon lounging by the pool, drinking expensive cocktails. Claire wore a bikini I had never seen before. A gift from him, no doubt. She leaned in, whispered something in his ear. He laughed. I clenched my jaw. There was no hesitation in her movements. No guilt in her eyes. Just a woman who had erased her marriage without a second thought. I took my time, moving casually through the resort, noting every detail. Their suite number, their habits, their schedule. By evening, they were dressed for dinner, stepping into the fine dining restaurant inside the resort. I followed. Not too close. Just enough. Enough to witness. Enough to burn it all into memory. They ordered wine. Nathan reached across the table, taking her hand. Claire smiled, touching his wrist. I still can't believe how easy it's been. My grip tightened on the edge of the bar where I sat, just a few feet away. Nathan smirked. Your husband really has no idea. Claire let out a soft laugh, sipping her wine like it was the easiest thing in the world. Not a clue. Something inside me snapped. Not with anger. With absolute clarity. Claire had made a fatal mistake. She thought she was untouchable. She was so wrong. It was time to set things in motion. While Claire and Nathan enjoyed their dinner, I stepped outside the restaurant, pulling out my phone. There was one person I needed to speak to. Jessica Reynolds. Nathan's ex-wife. I had looked her up days ago, cross-referencing social media posts, reading between the lines. Jessica had been blindsided by Nathan's infidelity. Their divorce had been finalized only 2 months ago. Her Instagram, full of cryptic captions about betrayal. I dialed her number. 3 rings. Then, hello. I smiled. Jessica. My name is Daniel Carter. You don't know me, but we have something in common. A pause. Who is this? I glanced through the restaurant's glass walls. Claire was still laughing, mocking me. I let my smile widen. I think you might want to know where your ex-husband is right now. Jessica didn't speak at first. I let the silence stretch, letting her process my words. Then, finally, where is he? Her voice was tight, controlled, but beneath it, I could hear the crack of raw fury. I smiled. That's exactly what I needed. Ocean Crest Resort, I said smoothly. Room 807. With my wife. A sharp inhale. A muttered curse. Then, you're sure? I leaned against the cool railing outside the resort restaurant, watching Claire through the glass. She tossed her hair back, laughing as Nathan traced circles over her wrist with his fingers. I'm watching them right now. Jessica exhaled, and when she spoke again, her voice was steely, filled with purpose. I'm on my way. Good. The first piece of my plan had just fallen into place. I had the scorned ex-wife fueled by betrayal. Now, it was time to set the rest of the stage. I needed proof. Not for me, I already knew the truth. But for Claire's family. Our friends. Her workplace. For everyone she thought she could deceive. I pulled out my phone and opened the spy camera app one had downloaded earlier that day. My reservations under a fake name gave me access to the resort's hallways, and I had already planted a small motion-activated camera facing their suite door. It had already recorded everything. Claire arriving. Nathan kissing her before they even reached the room. The way she practically jumped into his arms. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a life she had chosen. I backed up the footage to a secure cloud drive. Then, I added one more thing. A simple email. From Daniel Carter. To Claire's parents, her sister, our close friends, and her company's HR department. Subject. Important. Please watch this. No explanation. Just the video file attached. I hovered my finger over send. Not yet. Timing was everything. Jessica called me an hour later. I'm 5 minutes away, she said, her voice vibrating with restrained fury. I smirked. Perfect. You have a plan, right? I glanced up at the 8th floor balcony where I knew Claire and Nathan were. I always do. I headed to the front desk, putting the next phase into motion. The Ocean Crest lobby was crowded. A wedding party had just arrived, filling the space with laughter and luxury. And that's exactly what I needed. I approached the concierge, keeping my voice calm. Excuse me, I need to report something. The woman behind the desk gave me a polite smile. Of course, sir. What seems to be the issue? I leaned in slightly. "There's a man in room 807 who shouldn't be here." She blinked. "Pardon." I sighed, as if reluctant. "Nathan Reynolds. He's staying here with a woman who is not his wife. And his wife just arrived. She's on her way up." The concierge's expression shifted. I let that information settle before delivering the finishing blow. "I just thought it would be best if security was present. You know, in case things get out of hand." Her eyes widened. "Understood, sir," she said quickly. "We'll send someone up immediately." I nodded. The stage was set. Now, I just needed to watch the fireworks. I took the elevator to the 8th floor, stepping out just as Jessica stormed toward room 807. Her heels slammed against the polished floor. Her face, pure rage. She didn't hesitate. She raised her fist and pounded on the door. "Nathan, open the damn door." The hallway fell silent. A beat passed. Then, the door cracked open. Nathan stood there, shirtless, confused, unprepared. "Jess." His voice was hoarse. "What the hell?" She slapped him. Hard. People in the hallway gasped. "You cheating, lying, miserable piece of—" Nathan grabbed her wrist, pulling her inside the suite before the whole world could witness the carnage. But it was too late, because I had already followed her in. And standing there, in the middle of the lavish suite, was Claire, wrapped in a robe. Her face pale, lips parted in horror. She saw me, and it was like the world shattered. Daniel." I let the door slam shut behind me. I took my time, stepping forward, hands in my pockets, completely composed. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. "Having fun?" Claire's knees buckled. Nathan recovered first. "Listen, man, this—" I hit him. One punch. Straight to the jaw. He staggered back, knocking into the minibar, sending glass crashing to the floor. Claire screamed. "Jessica." She laughed. "Finally," she declared. "I've wanted to do that for years." Nathan groaned, clutching his face. I adjusted my sleeve. "I could have done worse." Claire rushed forward. "Daniel, please, let's talk." I pulled out my phone and hit send. She blinked. What did you just do?" I smiled. "Check your phone." Her hands trembled as she reached for her cell. Seconds later, her inbox exploded. A flood of messages, calls, notifications. Because everyone knew now. Her parents, her colleagues, her boss. She wasn't just a cheating wife. She was a disgrace. Claire dropped the phone, staring at me like I was a nightmare come to life. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Daniel, you ruined me." I tilted my head. "No, Claire." Then I leaned in, whispering the final words she'd ever hear from me. "You ruined yourself." And then I walked away. I walked out of that hotel suite, leaving Claire and Nathan behind in a mess of shattered glass, broken egos, and irreversible consequences. Jessica followed, her heels clicking against the marble floor with purpose. We didn't speak in the elevator. Didn't need to. We both knew what we had done. And now, we were going to watch it all burn. By the time I reached the hotel lobby, my phone was already buzzing non-stop. I glanced at the notifications, watching as Claire's name flooded my screen. Calls, texts, voicemails. I ignored them all. Jessica, standing beside me, let out a short laugh. "She's panicking." I smirked. "Let her." I scrolled through my messages. One stood out. Claire's mom. "Daniel, what is going on? Please call me." Perfect. I hit dial. After 2 rings, her mother answered, her voice frantic. "Daniel, I just saw the email. Tell me this isn't real." I exhaled, letting a pause stretch long enough to build tension. Then I said, "It's real." Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. "Oh my God." I let her process it. Claire's mother, Mary, was a woman who prided herself on family values, loyalty, and appearances. She had always adored me, saw me as the perfect husband for her daughter. And now, She was realizing her daughter wasn't who she thought she was. "I need to talk to Claire," she muttered, voice shaking. "Where is she?" I glanced back toward the elevator. "She's still upstairs," I said, amused at how quickly she had turned against her own daughter. Jessica snorted beside me, clearly enjoying the show. "Daniel," Mary said, voice heavy with guilt. I don't know what to say." I knew exactly what she meant. She wanted to apologize on Claire's behalf. But I wasn't interested in apologies. I was interested in letting Claire's entire world collapse in on itself. Jessica and I settled into the hotel bar, ordering whiskey on the rocks. 2 seats away, a group of businessmen were scrolling through their phones, laughing at something. One of them nudged the other. "Dude, did you see this?" I glanced at Jessica. We both knew. The video. The emails. The exposure. It was spreading. Then, the elevator doors slid open. And there she was. Claire. Her face was red, her hair a mess, her robe replaced with hastily thrown-on clothes. She looked around frantically, eyes darting, searching for me. I took a slow sip of my whiskey. I wanted her to see me. And when she did, it was glorious. Her breath hitched, and she started toward me with shaky steps. "Daniel," she whispered, voice broken. I said nothing, just stared, cold, unforgiving, completely detached. People were starting to recognize her now. She must have realized it too, because she wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to make herself smaller. But there was no hiding from this. Jessica, ever the queen of pettiness, took out her phone and snapped a picture. Claire flinched. "Jess, don't." Jessica smirked. "Just making sure Nathan has something to remember you by." I almost laughed. Claire looked on the verge of breaking. And honestly, I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Claire took a seat across from me, her hands trembling against the table. "Please," she whispered. "Can we talk?" I raised an eyebrow. "Talk?" She nodded quickly, desperate. I leaned back, studying her. She looked so small. So unlike the confident woman who had strutted into this resort earlier, wrapped around another man. I could have ended it here. Could have told her to go to hell and walked away. But where's the fun in that? "Fine," I said. "Talk." She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. I didn't mean for this to happen." A classic. I sighed. "Claire, spare me the speech. You meant for all of it to happen." She shook her head violently. No, I was just..." I cut her off. "Just lying to me for months? Just making a fool out of me?" She flinched. "Good." Jessica, sipping her whiskey beside me, let out a dry chuckle. "This is pathetic." Claire turned to her, face crumpling. "Jess, please, Jessica leaned forward. "Do you know how many times I defended you? To Daniel, to other people. I told them you weren't like Nathan. That you weren't a cheater. But look at you." Claire burst into tears. I felt nothing. Not even a flicker of sympathy. Just cold satisfaction. Then, finally, I leaned forward. And I said the words I had been waiting to say. "Claire, you're dead to me." Her breath hitched. I stood, pulling out my wallet, tossing a few bills onto the table. "For the drinks," I said. "You can't even afford that anymore." Then I turned, walking away. Claire sobbed. Jessica followed me, tossing one last look over her shoulder. "You deserve this," she said simply. Then we left her there. Alone. Ruined. Exactly where she belonged. The night air was crisp as I stepped outside the Ocean Crest Resort, leaving Claire behind in her self-made disaster. Jessica walked beside me, her heels clicking against the pavement, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and lingering fury. "That was the best thing I've seen in years," she muttered, tossing her hair over her shoulder. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders. And we're just getting started. Because Claire's world wasn't done crumbling. Not even close. I checked my phone. The email I had sent was spreading. I scrolled through the influx of reactions. "Claire's sister, what the hell did I just watch? Claire, how could you do this? Her best friend, Megan, this is disgusting. You're a liar. Lose my number. Her boss. Claire, we need to talk. Immediately. And the best one. Her father. A short, brutal message. Dad, don't come home. I smiled. Good. She had spent months living a double life, convinced she could have it all. Now, she had nothing. I turned to Jessica. Nathan still blowing up your phone? She smirked, holding up her screen. Calls. Texts. Desperate voicemails. Oh, he's begging, she said. It's kind of cute. I chuckled. He doesn't know it's over yet. Jessica's eyes gleamed. Let's make sure he does. While Claire was drowning in social disgrace, Nathan was about to lose something bigger, his career. I had done my research. Nathan wasn't just some middle manager. He was an executive at Claire's company. And guess what? Workplace affairs with subordinates don't look good on a resume. I opened my phone and called James Porter, one of the senior board members I had met at a few corporate events. He answered on the second ring. Daniel. Bit late, isn't it? I smiled. James, I thought you'd like to know something. Nathan Reynolds has been violating company policy. A pause. Then, go on. I laid it all out. Nathan, a high-ranking exec, had been sleeping with a married subordinate. He was using company-funded business trips to book secret getaways. He was a liability waiting to happen. James sighed. This is bad. For Nathan, yeah, I said. James was quiet for a moment. Then, you didn't send this to HR yet, did you? Not yet. Good. Send it to me first. I smirked. Nathan was about to lose everything. I was halfway home when my phone rang. Claire. I stared at the screen, letting it ring. Then, at the last second, I answered. Silence. Then, a shaky, broken whisper. Daniel. I leaned back in my seat. What do you want, Claire? A small sob. Please, can we talk? Face to face. I laughed. We already did, remember? In your fancy hotel suite with Nathan. She sobbed harder. I lost everything. I smiled. No, Claire. You threw it away. She sniffled. I don't know where to go. My parents won't talk to me. Megan blocked me. Even work. I interrupted. Your job's on the line, huh? A long silence. Then, finally, a whisper. Yes. I shook my head. Let me guess. Nathan isn't answering your calls either. More silence. I had never heard her so weak. So lost. I should have felt something. But I didn't. Not sympathy. Not guilt. Just cold satisfaction. Daniel, she whispered. I don't have anyone. I took a slow breath. Then, in the calmest voice I had ever used, I said, Good. And I hung up. The next morning, it was all over the news. Nathan Reynolds, corporate executive, fired amid workplace misconduct scandal. Claire Carter, disgraced employee, under investigation for professional ethics violations. Ex-husband reveals shocking truth about betrayal. I closed the laptop, sipping my coffee, feeling lighter than I had in years. Claire's career was over. Nathan's reputation was destroyed. And me. I was finally free. It was time for the aftermath to truly begin. The world had turned upside down for Claire and Nathan. Their worlds, once built on deceit and self-righteous confidence, were now in ruins. Yet, I felt no satisfaction from watching it all crumble. No, satisfaction was far too simple a word for what I was feeling. It wasn't just about exposing Claire's betrayal or ruining Nathan's career. It was about power, the kind of power that came from taking control, from stripping people of their illusions. They had thought they could escape the consequences. But now, everyone would see who they truly were. I woke up the next morning to messages flooding my inbox, mostly from people still reeling from the fallout. Jessica had kept her distance after everything, probably not wanting to become a permanent part of the drama, but her silence was enough to let me know she had moved on to her next conquest. Claire's father called me once again, his voice shaking with outrage and disbelief. He had seen the video. His daughter's face was forever burned into his memory now. But I didn't feel like talking to him. I didn't feel like comforting anyone. The truth was out, and there was no going back. As I made my morning coffee, I checked the news again. The scandal had made headlines. Nathan's fall from grace was more public than I'd imagined. Corporate executives scrambling to save face, board members talking to HR, the media having a field day. The press had a field day, portraying Nathan as a womanizer, a man who had sacrificed his marriage, his career, and ultimately his dignity. But I wasn't concerned about Nathan. He would have to live with the mess he made. The real mess was Claire. I had expected her to come crawling back. Expected her to beg for forgiveness. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I sent one last text to Claire, just to put a final nail in the coffin. You've lost everything. Not just Nathan. Not just your job. You've lost yourself. And with that, I shut my phone off. I couldn't bear to look at her face anymore. It was too much, too painful, and I didn't want any reminders of the woman I had once loved. The woman who had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. It was time for me to move on. But as I sat down and began to work, a thought crept into my mind. A small, insignificant thought at first, but it grew over time. What if I could do more? What if there were more people like Claire? More people who needed to be exposed? And that's when the idea formed. I wasn't done yet. I had only just begun. The fallout from this affair would ripple through the industry. It would send a message to those who thought they could hide in the shadows, shielded by their power and money. I would expose them all, one by one. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But because they needed to be reminded of one thing. There are consequences for every action. Every lie. Every betrayal. And I was the one who would make sure they were held accountable. Time passed. It wasn't immediate. The world around me, everything that had unfolded so quickly, so mercilessly, settled into a strange kind of silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm, the kind where you can feel the tension in the air long after the winds have died down. But while Claire and Nathan were living through their own personal hells, I was still moving forward. There was no turning back, no reason to look over my shoulder. The past was a place that had already been burned to the ground, and nothing could revive it. I hadn't expected to feel this way. I had imagined that once the truth was out, once the public saw Claire for what she truly was, I would feel some measure of satisfaction. Maybe even closure. But that wasn't how it worked. The truth, while powerful, had its own consequences, ones that were harder to navigate than I could have ever anticipated. For the first time in years, I felt free. But it wasn't the kind of freedom I had hoped for. It wasn't the joyful release that came with the idea of revenge finally served. It was a hollow feeling. A feeling that came from realizing that in taking down everyone who had wronged me, I had also lost something along the way. A part of myself I hadn't even known was still there. That's the problem with revenge. It doesn't give you back what you lost. It just makes you a different person. And sometimes, that new version of yourself isn't someone you recognize. The weight of it all was hard to ignore. But life has a way of moving forward, whether you're ready for it or not. I had found myself, for the first time, standing on the edge of something new. Something I hadn't even imagined possible. I started working again, quietly. There was no need for fanfare, no need to announce my intentions to the world. The fire had already been lit. It was a quiet kind of revolution, one that didn't need to be shouted from rooftops. My career was something I had let go of years ago, in favor of keeping the peace, of staying within the boundaries of what was expected of me. But now, there were no boundaries. There were no rules except the ones I chose to set. I became more involved in corporate circles, in spaces where people like Nathan had once thrived. I did my research, checked my sources, and saw the lies and deceit that ran rampant through the industry. It was easy to slip in unnoticed, to observe from the shadows. I wasn't there to make a name for myself. I didn't need to prove anything. But I couldn't stop myself from pulling the strings, just a little. Small things. Things no one would notice, but that would send ripples through the established order. A whisper here. A suggestion there. I was meticulous, careful, and in the end, I became something I hadn't anticipated, an agent of change. I found myself helping those who had been wronged by the system. Those who didn't have the power to expose the lies. The ones who were still lost, searching for answers. They didn't even know what was coming. But I did. And I knew that the world needed to see the truth, even if they didn't want to. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something deeper. Something more meaningful. I became a quiet force, one that worked behind the scenes to rewrite the rules. And then, months later, I received an unexpected message. It was from Claire's mother. I hadn't heard from her since that night in the lobby, when she had spoken to me through trembling lips. The last time I had seen her, she was struggling to grasp the reality of her daughter's betrayal. But her message was brief, cold even. "Can we meet? I need to speak to you." I hesitated. It wasn't the closure I had wanted. Not from her. But she was the last one left in the wreckage of Claire's life. The final piece of the puzzle, so to speak. I agreed. The meeting was arranged at a small cafe, a neutral place, far from the prying eyes of anyone who knew either of us. When I arrived, Mary was already seated, her hands folded on the table in front of her. She was composed, but I could see the cracks beneath the surface. She didn't speak right away. She just stared at me, her expression a mixture of regret and guilt. I could see it in her eyes, the way she had lost her daughter, the way the truth had broken her in ways she hadn't expected. "Daniel," she finally said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "I owe you an apology. For everything. I don't know where to start." I raised a hand, cutting her off. "You don't have to apologize to me. The truth is out. It's over. There's nothing left to say." Mary's eyes dropped to the table. She looked defeated, as if the weight of the world had crushed her. I didn't see it," she whispered. "I didn't see how far she'd gone. How deep she had buried her lies. And I'm sorry that you had to carry all of that on your own." I leaned back in my chair. This wasn't the apology I was waiting for. But it was the one I needed, the one that would allow me to finally move forward. "It's not your fault," I said. "You didn't have a hand in her decisions. But you were complicit in letting it all slide under the radar. You couldn't have known, but you could have tried harder to see. You're not the only one who was blind." Mary's face tightened. "I was her mother. I should have known. I should have protected you." "You can't protect anyone from themselves, Mary. Not when they choose to lie." She nodded slowly. "I know." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything hanging between us. And then, in that stillness, I realized something. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of peace. It wasn't the satisfaction I'd once sought. It wasn't the bitterness that had once consumed me. It was simply peace, something I had long forgotten. "Thank you," Mary said, her voice thick with emotion, "for letting me apologize." I stood up, brushing off the dust of the past one last time. There was nothing left to hold me back. "I don't need your apology," I said, my voice steady, calm. "Just move forward. Be better than she was." I walked out of the cafe, leaving Mary behind, her figure small in my rearview mirror. The past was a collection of broken pieces, and I had no intention of ever putting them back together again. And as I drove home that night, I realized that what I had set in motion wasn't about revenge, or power, or even redemption. It was about breaking free from the chains that had once bound me. Claire had tried to tear me apart. But in the end, it was she who had been destroyed. And I was free.